Today we're diving into a collection of rare and largely unseen photographs from the Second World War. Images that capture moments of history, humanity, and horror, often from angles and perspectives you won't find in your textbooks. These are the lost photos of World War II. We open not during the war itself, but in its long shadow. January 5th, 1952, President Harry S. Truman stands on the tarmac at Washington National Airport, greeting dignitaries arriving alongside British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Behind Churchill on the left is British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden. To the right, British Ambassador to the United States Oliver Franks. Visible in the background is the President's personal aircraft, the Independence. The alliance that had held the free world together was, even years later, still very much intact. 6 weeks after D-Day, Allied forces are pushing through Normandy, but occupation brings its own challenges, maintaining discipline and managing relations with the local French population. Here, an American GI reads a posted table of crimes and corresponding fines for misconduct. July 17, 1944. Even in the middle of a war, military law didn't take a day off. The war in Europe is over. Now the question is, what comes next? July 23, 1945. At the Potsdam Conference, the three most powerful men in the world share an extraordinary handshake. From left to right, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, President Harry S. Truman, and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin. The smiles are diplomatic. The tensions beneath them would define the next half-century. Back to France, July 31, 1944. General Philippe Leclerc, commander of the French 2nd Armored Division, chats with Major General Walton H. Walker on the beaches of Normandy. The French unit had just landed on their own soil, ready to fight for the liberation of their homeland. For Leclerc and his men, this was deeply personal. This next image is one of the war's most sobering. June 8, 1944, 2 days after the initial landings, American assault troops from the 3rd Battalion, 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, lie on the sands of Omaha Beach near Colleville-sur-Mer. They had tried to push across a narrow strip of beach. They didn't make it. Just a few hundred feet from the surf. The cost of those first hours at Omaha is written in every one of these photographs. This one is from D-Day itself. June 6, 1944. A soldier from the same regiment, the 3rd Battalion, 16th Infantry, has just come ashore from a landing craft at Colleville-sur-Mer. He sits catching his breath. He has survived the crossing. He has survived the beach. What comes next? Only the days ahead will tell. Photographer Taylor captured something rare here. Not heroism in action, but a single quiet moment in the midst of absolute chaos. A remarkable story from the Eastern Front. A group of Russian soldiers led by Private Dmitry Byakhin makes their way back to Allied lines, having escaped from a point near Smolensk, where they had been conscripted by the Germans against their will. Before making their escape, they killed their German non-commissioned officer. Allied forces helped guide them through no man's land. Once safely behind Allied lines, they provided valuable intelligence, a story of defiance that almost never got told. We jump forward in time and far across the Atlantic. Uruguay, 2006. A dive team led by Hector Bato recovers the figurehead, a large imperial eagle, from the wreck of the German heavy cruiser, Graf Spee. The ship was scuttled in the River Plate estuary on December 17, 1939, following the famous Battle of the River Plate. Bato, who has salvaged wrecks all over the world including Spanish galleons off the Uruguayan coast, called the Graf Spee the most notorious of them all. Today, the ship's rangefinder sits on display at the Uruguayan Navy Administration Building. Even 67 years later, the war still had things to give up. Not every document of war comes with a camera. These are drawings made by Polish children in 1946, images from their own memories of the conflict. What they chose to draw and how they drew it tells you everything about what they witnessed. There are no captions needed here. The children speak for themselves. March 9, 1945. The Reich is crumbling. Soviet forces are closing in from the east. And yet here in Lobau, Silesia, Reich Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels pins the Iron Cross on a 16-year-old boy named Willy Hübner. Hübner had served as a messenger for the Führer Grenadier Division during fighting to retake the area from Red Army forces. He survived the war and later became a politician in East Germany. This image, taken just weeks before the German surrender, encapsulates the desperation of a regime willing to send children to the front. Step back almost a decade. 1936, the Nuremberg Rally. a masterwork of political theater and mass manipulation. These annual gatherings were designed to project power, unity, and invincibility. Architect Albert Speer's Cathedral of Light, the endless columns of uniformed men, the choreographed crowds, all of it engineered to make a nation feel unstoppable. Less than a decade later, that nation lay in ruins. This is what the war looked like from the inside of a Messerschmitt Bf-110, flying over France in November 1940, shot from the radio operator and rear gunner's position. The cockpit is tight, the visibility is limited, and the construction looks alarmingly fragile by modern standards. Anyone who has seen what a .50 caliber round can do to sheet metal will understand exactly how exposed these men were. Every single time they went up. There is something deeply unsettling about this photograph. Adolf Hitler, now the all-powerful Führer of Germany, visits Fromelles in northern France in 1940, the very ground where he served as a corporal in the First World War. He is standing in or near a trench he once occupied as a young soldier. Whether this was a moment of personal reflection, propaganda, or both, we can only speculate. What we do know is that the world he helped create in the wake of that visit would cost tens of millions of lives. A rare look at the kind of man who ended up in the Dirlewanger Brigade. This is the 1930 mugshot of German student Kallistros Thieleke, taken after he murdered his mother, stabbing her 17 times. He would go on to join the Dirlewanger Brigade, an SS unit composed almost entirely of convicted violent criminals. Their record of atrocity was so extreme that even other SS units were horrified by them. The brigade operated primarily in German-occupied Eastern Europe, leaving a trail of civilian massacres, torture, rape, and murder wherever they went. Even their own commander, Oskar Dirlewanger, regularly beat and killed his own men. The Dirlewanger Brigade represents one of the darkest corners of an already extraordinarily dark war. Buchenberg, 1934. The Reichserntedankfest, the Reich Harvest Thanksgiving Festival. Hundreds of thousands of Germans gathered on a hillside to celebrate a bumper harvest, and more importantly, to be seen celebrating Adolf Hitler's Germany. These mass spectacles were central to the Nazi project, binding ordinary people to the regime through shared ritual. Looking at the scale of this crowd, it is hard not to feel the weight of what was being set in motion. A quietly extraordinary image. Erwin Rommel, one of the most gifted military commanders of the Second World War, caught asleep on his way to occupied Warsaw in 1939. At this point, he was commanding Hitler's personal escort battalion. Within a year, he would be commanding the 7th Panzer Division during the lightning invasion of France. Within 2 years, his campaigns in North Africa would earn him the nickname that would follow him to history, the Desert Fox. Even his British adversaries respected him. Here, he is just a man. Tired, eyes closed, the future still ahead of him. Germany has surrendered. At Stavanger, Norway, a collection of captured German Kar 98K rifles is laid out, the standard infantry weapon of the Wehrmacht throughout the war. These rifles tell their own story of a war that stretched from the Arctic to the Sahara, from the English Channel to the outskirts of Moscow. Now they are simply cargo, evidence of an army that no longer exists. April 20th, 1945, Hitler's birthday and one of the strangest survival stories of the war. German pilot Eduard Schallmoser, flying a Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter, collides mid-air with an American B-26 Marauder medium bomber over Germany. Somehow, Schallmoser manages to bail out by parachute. He descends and lands in the garden directly in front of his own parents' house. His mother witnesses the entire thing. In the final days of the most destructive war in human history, a son falls from the sky into his own backyard. You genuinely could not write it. For those who know their World War II photography, the second of these two images is already famous. Two here soldiers with MP-40 submachine guns crouched behind a dirt mound somewhere in the ruins of Stalingrad, summer 1942. What makes this pairing extraordinary is that the first image, newly uncovered, is the same scene, shot from a completely different angle. Two photographers, two perspectives, the same frozen moment in what would become one of the deadliest battles in human history. Stalingrad would claim over 1 million lives before it was over. Southern Russia, 1942. This is Major Clemens Count of Schönborn-Wiesentide, commander of the 77th Dive Bomber Wing, Sturmkampfgeschwader 77. He commanded the wing during the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia and went on to serve on the Eastern Front. He was killed on August 30th, 1944, when his aircraft crashed near Sofia, Bulgaria under unknown circumstances. He had been on his way to attend a general staff meeting A life and a career of both service and destruction ended without explanation, thousands of miles from home. A brief moment of levity. Somewhere on the Eastern Front early in the war, a German soldier slips on ice. The camera catches him mid-fall. It is, in the context of everything else in this collection, almost jarring. A reminder that even in the machinery of global war, men are still just men, cold, clumsy, and momentarily undignified. We close on one of the most historically significant candid moments ever photographed. June 17, 1940. Photographer Walter Frentz captures Adolf Hitler in the instant he receives word that France has agreed to surrender. The expression on his face, the physicality of his reaction, has been described and debated for decades. In 6 weeks, Germany had done what it failed to do in 4 years of the First World War. For Hitler, this was the moment everything he had planned seemed to be working. The tragedy, of course, is what came next. These photographs remind us that history isn't made of dates and statistics alone. It's made of moments, faces, a sleeping general, a child's drawing, a soldier catching his breath on a beach. Thank you for watching. If you found this collection as powerful as we did, like and subscribe. There's much more history waiting to be uncovered.